Welcome to chapel. I hope you're doing great today. I hope you had a great weekend. I'm so excited and thrilled to welcome the Reverend Dr. Samuel Cruz, who is preaching today. So when I was inviting him to come preach, we were talking about other things. We were texting, and then he texted me, I wonder if there's any hope for the rich. And I was like, gosh, I don't know. Like I kept thinking like, okay, I wonder what he's talking about. Like, and he goes, that's the title for my sermon. I was like, oh, okay. I thought he was actually talking about a certain person because I was about to say, I don't think so. But anyway, so I'm just so glad that you're here with us. If you will allow me to just say a few words about him that I feel are very, very important for Union and for the world. He is a Latino theologian, a pastor and scholar. He works and centers his work around the lives and faith of Latinx and Afro-Latinx communities and their liberative theologies. His teaching and public ministry focus on decolonial critique, Pentecostalism, race, and the intersections of faith and social transformation. He always has a commitment to advocating for justice and empowering all of those who are in the margins. I don't know if you saw him a lot on social media. I remember, especially during COVID and during the past few years, always at the forefront of justice. He partners with community leaders and archivists to preserve and amplify Latinx spiritual legacies here at Union. And he helped establish the Mama Leo archives also. And as you saw, I think in the emails that you got this week, on October 18th, which is a Saturday at 9 a.m., we will have the Mama Leo lecture. And it's a series that happens every year. How long has it been going on? The fourth year. Wow, that's amazing. And Mama Leo, who is Reverend Leoncia, Rosado, and is it Russo? Russo? Okay. A pioneer whose ministry embodied service to and liberation with communities at the margins, like the Reverend Dr. Cruz. We will hear a Bible text, and then we will welcome you. Thank you.
For today, the scripture is taken from the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 16, verse 19 to verse 31. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us. He said, Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come into this place of torment. Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them. He said, no, Father Abraham. But if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. This is the gospel of Christ.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra, for the invitation to speak this afternoon. As I was reading this gospel lesson, I put the title, Can the Rich and Powerful Change? Because I was reading this gospel lesson, and let me tell you what I thought about first. I thought about Jan Riemann. You all know Jan Riemann? Many years ago, we were having a conversation, and he said, since we both do social theory, and social theorists are kind of pessimistic about the possibility of change. He said, Sam, our students think that they could change people with a sermon. And we all think that we're going to change people's minds and make people think differently. And it's not as simple as that. I don't want to be pessimistic, but this is not necessarily a talk on hope. But it's a talk on calling us to stay committed regardless of the results we see. So in this passage, it's a really interesting passage because we all start thinking, oh, the rich person went to hell, or whatever hell might mean, and the poor person went the other way. But I think personally that Jesus was doing serious social political analysis with this passage. When you read it, at least the way I read it, as a liberationist, or some people would call empire biblical studies now, they call it, right? But first, let me just say that let me also say that I think it's very appropriate for this day and age we're living in, especially what I've seen lately with the death of, what was his name? Charlie something. I think I've lost a couple of relatives over this Charlie, whatever his name is. The parable of Lazarus and the rich man is a very clear and in-your-face message, but I think we miss on it. And there's three things I want to mention about it that call my attention. And they call my attention because it helps me in my social justice work, because it makes me reflect upon myself, about myself. And let me just say something. Prosperity gospel that I'm going to talk about is more a part of our lives than what we think, in my opinion. It's not only evangelicals and Pentecostals and these right-wing crazy nuts that say there's Christianity. It's deep in every facet of our society. And when you miss that, it's problematic. The problem is that that type of prosperity gospel is crass prosperity gospel, I call it. It's Reverend Ike type of prosperity gospel. But we have prosperity gospel going on all over the place. So there are three things in this gospel lesson. The poor person has a name, Lazarus. And the rich and powerful person doesn't have a name. I've heard that said since I was a kid in church, but I never saw it the way I see it now. This is probably understood better in a Latino community, but I'll try to translate it into other communities. When we have people working, let's say in our yard, we refer to them like this: el negrito, the black guy; el indio, the Indian guy; el gordito, the chubby guy; el calvito, which I don't really like much, the bald guy. But when we have someone working for us who is not from the bottom of the socioeconomic strata, we call them by their name. El Señor Gutierrez, Mr. Smith, Mr. Whatever. Do you see the difference how we treat people without knowing? And really what we're saying is that the people who are from the dominant class or have more deserve to have a name. So I don't think Jesus was unaware of what he was doing. He said, I'm going to give a name to the person who's at the bottom and refer to the other one by something that he's the rich man, the black guy, the Hispanic guy. Let's call it that way. So we participate in, without knowing, in different ways. The apparatus of oppression is so ingrained and internalized in us that even those of us who are part of the oppressed class participate in that process. The parable also challenges one of the major ideologies and theologies of our day in the theological world that I referred to a minute ago, right? Prosperity gospel. That if you're in good standing with God, you will prosper. Well, prosperity gospel is not new. It's found in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, where people believed that being blessed meant you were well connected with God. And we just have crass prosperity gospel that manifests itself in a different way. But it is dangerous, in my opinion, to not realize that prosperity gospel is part of all theologies, whether we realize it or not. And it's extremely problematic in my perspective when liberals, or whatever, I don't know what you call people, liberals, people who are more progressive, don't realize that prosperity gospel is part of their theology. Pierre Bourdieu talks about symbolic power or symbolic domination. Well, what are the big churches that we consider to be important churches sometimes in this society? Maybe you don't, but in New York City, I could name to you the churches that we consider powerful. Trinity Wall Street, St. John the Divine, St. Patrick's Cathedral, Riverside. What do they all represent? Power and opulence by their size. That's what we consider major Christian centers in New York City. In fact, it's not only within Christianity. I visited 6 months ago, if not the biggest, the second biggest Hindu temple in the world. It's found in Robbinsville, New Jersey. Have you heard of it? Any of you seen it or heard of it? Well, it's in Robbinsville, New Jersey. It's huge. In their parking lot, you could park 5,000 cars. It takes you 2 days to walk through the whole system. And I say to myself, what message is this sending you? It's telling you that opulence and God are in some ways connected. They're not telling you that they used some slave labor to build the temple. That is not said. And that they exploited many people to be able to create such an opulent center. And so I'm not picking on that temple. I mentioned other Christian churches. I want to be clear about that. It's not picking on that temple. It's, I think it's just important for us to recognize that we progressives, we have a theology of prosperity. You know? Even this chapel, it's not that it's huge, but it was built in a certain way to tell you and me that the people here were sophisticated. This is not a storefront church. from Harlem, when no one's going to really think that there's real spirituality there, because it's not connected to what we see as real spirituality. So Jesus, in this parable, that we focus on the fact that maybe the rich guy ended up in some place that we see now today as hell. I don't know if Jesus was meaning hell like Christians do, but Jesus challenges prosperity gospel of his day. Because all of a sudden, if everybody thinks that the wealthy and those who are well off are the ones that are connected to God, and Jesus is saying the rich person is going to hell and the poor person is going to the bosom of Abraham, he was shattering the ideas and ideology of that day. But we don't think about that because we just focus on how the parable is kind of interesting, right? Somebody's ending up in hell, somebody's ending up in heaven, a poor guy that was suffering. No, Jesus is saying he's interrupting, he's challenging the ideology of prosperity of his day. And he makes it clear. The poor person wasn't going to heaven because they were good or he was good. He is going to the good place because he was poor. It's a radical message. Has nothing to do with being nice. Because let me tell you, we know a lot of poor people that are not that nice, right? So it's not like we're going to say poor people are nice. We advocate for them because they're oppressed. But it has nothing to do with being nice or not. The rich person who Jesus didn't even want to name or give a name ends up in a place that we Christians call hell. I don't know if that was Jesus' intent. Not for anything he did wrong, but just because he had wealth. But Jesus has said that before, right? Before this passage, he says, woe to those who are rich because they receive their due here on earth. Blessed be the poor because they will receive the kingdom of God. So, we must, I think, to some extent, rid ourselves of those ideologies that are oppressive that we even social justice people carry around. So in this passage, Jesus seems to say, sorry to the VIPs, but you're not going to the preferred seating, you're going to hell. So we really have to start thinking about that. How we live our lives in our churches and our institutions, who are being privileged and why? Do we participate in that false ideology that the more wealth you have, and wealth could be translated into education. It's not only wealth, it's not only material. There's cultural capital. Are we privileging those who are highly educated over those who are not? We have to question ourselves. Then the question is for us as social activists, can those who are privileged, let's include ourselves to some extent, privileged not like the most powerful, but that have something, is it possible for us to change? And this gospel lesson seems to say almost no, from my perspective. And I see it in society, how people can vote for a man who's against them, but the ideology that is in their mind continues to support them. Because look what happens in this passage, which I think is one of the most interesting parts of the passage for me. The rich guy, the guy without a name, goes to hell, right? We think it's hell because it's hot down there, apparently, where he was at. What does he do? Does he ask for forgiveness? No, he says, send the poor guy to give me water. He still believed that the Lazarus was there to be his servant. Even, I asked Sandra if I could curse, so I'm going to curse. Even though his ass was burning, he didn't change his mind. You understand what I'm saying? He couldn't conceive that Lazarus wasn't there to be his servant. So it tells me that even if you're burning in hell, you can't really change. Or it is very difficult to change. It seems virtually impossible, and that's why we see so many people supporting an individual whose politics ideology is against them. Because once you've been infused by dominant ideology, it's hard to get rid of. That's why John Riemann said, a sermon ain't gonna do it. And Karl Marx talked about false consciousness. And other theorists, Michel Foucault spoke about the episteme of an error. In other words, how difficult it is to get out of the system. But I think we should at least be able to self-reflect and see, I've come to the conclusion that the only thing I could possibly do is to be a thorn on the side of the system. I said, even if I can't change things, because this is too ingrained in our society, I'm going to at least speak up against it. And if that's all I can do, that's what I would do. Thank you for listening this morning.
Wow. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions or challenge? This was a lot. Stephanie, you're like, I do have a question, but I don't want to ask it. I have a question. Yes. You want me to say something? Okay. What you said is filled with things that I was amening and yes and all that. And I wonder, a lot of times as humans, I know that I want to give somebody a chance, like, okay, yes, I'm going to change. What do you think about that, like, as we are here and not like at the end of our life? Is there hope for us to change?
Maybe I wasn't nuanced enough because this is a brief time to speak. I was referring more not to personal changes, but changes that have to do with the ideologies that we're involved in. That social structure is more powerful and social systems than what we think. So whether there's possibility of change, I guess I would say yes and no. I only say yes because I have hope. If not, I would have to just give up. But, Bourdieu, who I mentioned before, did a study of those who were in power in France. And he found that for 1,500 years, there was a connection between everybody who was in power. So we don't see it like that, but almost everybody that ends up in power is connected. So how do you change that system? Even Obama, they said, was connected to one of the past presidents of the United States. So I guess what I'm saying that it's much more complicated than and sometimes I guess I'm critiquing myself as, I don't know what liberals are, but I guess I'm one of them because I fit in. I'm being serious. I don't know what really, I'm like more of a leftist, but we deceive ourselves. We think we know more than those who are oppressed. And sometimes we're doing the same thing in just a liberal face. So I guess my caution is to myself. How do I act? How do I speak to people who are working in my yard? How do I refer to them? That's the smaller way. But that has implications for the larger structural reality. So I don't know if I answered you, but. It is complicated. So this woman from my church, I preached this sermon yesterday. She says, "So what do rich people in rich churches preach about this passage?" And I said, they preach something that protects them. They'll find a way. Because that passage is pretty clear. I'm sorry, I'm not a New Testament scholar, but I don't know what else you can get out of it. Somebody went to hell for being rich and somebody went to heaven for being poor. What else could you get out of it? Unless you convolute your interpretation to try to get meaning other than that from it. It's a difficult passage. So I said, but it was a good question because she was saying, and she asked me. I say because it's good to be asked and challenged. She said, but aren't there some good rich people? But the point is not about individuals here. The point is structurally, how do we operate? Because structurally, a lot of us participate in the oppressive systems that oppress us. That's the problem, you know? I mean, in my church, we have a lot of people from the island of the Dominican Republic, from the half island of the Dominican Republic, who are all black and are racist against black people. So you're participating in your own oppression, but we're not able to see it, you know? So that's what I think. And even when it's in your face, I mean, if you read this gospel lesson, I said earlier, it's in your face. It's pretty clear, but we'll find ways to reinterpret it. In the same way that I have some nieces that unfriended me, it's called, from Facebook, because they didn't like what I had to say about Charlie Charlie Kirk. I kind of don't want to learn his name, but and they are in worse situations than I am in terms of class structure and status. And they can't see him say that black women are inferior. How could you hear that and not see it? But I guess this passage is telling us, beware, you liberals, how you're participating in oppressive systems without knowing it. And that's what I find fascinating from this passage.
I was doing a anti-racism training a couple years ago, and one of the distinctions I really appreciated them saying is they're like, we really like to use the word privilege, my privilege, privilege, and they're like, but sometimes we use that to hide when we should be saying my power. Mm-hmm. And it becomes like this softening to almost pretend like, oh, I don't actually have the power to change this. I just have privilege within the system. And I'm just hearing that reflected in what you're saying right now. It's like there are a lot of places that we have power, and me in my lower income area doesn't mean I don't have power. And it was a great training that challenged me to look at the areas in my life that I never considered myself a gatekeeper. I'd love to bring that training to Union sometime. Anyway, I'm going to give this up because I think there was another hand.
Thank you. Thank you for the nuggets that you dropped, and I came late, so I may have missed something. But what's coming to mind is what happens if the oppressed changes their social structure, if they work and they're no longer poor, but they could be oppressed, I guess. They're no longer poor, and now they're wealthy. How does this parable fit with that situation?
I think your question gets to the point of what I'm thinking about. The problem are not individuals, it's the structure. And I'll answer you in this way. I was brought years ago to the 72nd precinct, where my church is located at, and the commanding officer there wanted to speak to pastors. to try to solve some of the issues in the community. And I said at one point, we don't need more Black and Latinx police officers. I mean, fine if we do. They all become the same once they're in that system. Why can't we talk about, because trying to talk about getting more Black and Latinos is really evading the problem. I said, we can't find officers that don't want to kill Black and Latino people and abuse them? I mean, that's weird. Why don't you just find, I don't care if it's 100% white, as long as they don't abuse the people. The problem is not here bringing more Black and Latino people. You're avoiding the problem that is the racism, white supremacies, and abuse that is allowed by the system. Because all you have to do is make one officer pay, and they're all going to start changing their tune. So, yes, I think you're asking that people sometimes move from economic strata and then become like the oppressors. Paulo Freire said that. Many years ago, he said, the problem is that the oppressed become the oppressor once they become, because you know why that is? That's all we know how to do. We don't have examples of how to live differently, and leadership that lives differently, yes.
Don't you think that it's more than that, though? Like, that it's almost a strategy they use to make the behavior acceptable? Because now we can, when it is Black and brown officers, now you can say, see, it wasn't racism. So there's like this side thing that happens too, right? Like when we deflect by saying we just need more Black and brown officers, because it's not just about avoiding the racism question. It's about making this parallel that, like, it's not really whiteness that did it, right? Because it doesn't matter who we put there.
Yes.
So it like flips the script too on like trying to identify the problem.
Some people have tried to use that as an excuse, but the reality is that it's white supremacy what rules that system.